Awesome. Welcome everyone to meeting 6, the last meeting of the City of Santa Clara Homelessness Task Force. So our agenda for today is pretty packed and consists of the following items. We'll do an abbreviated welcome and intro section, review the 2022 City of Santa Clara point in time count, feedback sources and themes, review some goals and values, get into our draft city plan framework, and hold a section for public comment, as well as task force Q&A and discussion. So after that, we'll wrap up and cover a few next steps. And we won't be asking folks to come off of mute and introduce themselves, but I'll go through and quickly introduce our home-based team, city staff, and our task force members as we get started. Okay, so Homebase is a nonprofit that works with communities to support their efforts to end homelessness. And we are here today as neutral facilitators of the task force. My name is Joy, and I'm a policy analyst at Homebase, and I'm joined here by my colleagues Eli and Carla. And we're excited to be with you all at this last task force meeting. We'll go ahead and also start by acknowledging the City of Santa Clara team present today. So we're joined by Andrew Crabtree, the Community Development Department Director, Adam Marcus, the Housing and Community Services Division Manager, Sergeant Gregory Dager of the City of Santa Clara Police Department, and Jennifer Carvalho, Staff Aide of the Housing and Community Services Division. And we also wanted to acknowledge our task force members who have represented the community thus far. The task force is a group of community members and system partners working to give feedback and advise the city on issues related to homelessness throughout this process. So we thank you all for being here with us today. And just to go over some Zoom norms for task force members, we'd love to see your faces. So if possible, we invite you to turn on your cameras so we can see who all is here with us today. If you do have a question, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen before coming off mute. And as a reminder, we will be recording this session. And if you're experiencing any tech difficulties at all, please feel free to send a chat to the Homebase team as your facilitators or email our team email, cityofsantaclara@homebasecc.org. And for attendees, if you all have a question, we invite you to use the Q&A function to submit a question during the session. The Q&As during this meeting will be moderated and we'll try to answer them as time allows. But for this meeting, we'll also be having a public comment period following the presentation and before the task force discussion. So once again, this task force session will be recorded and later posted on the city's homelessness task force webpage. And if you're experiencing any issues, please feel free to contact the facilitators and one of us will be willing to help you out. So just as a starting place for some discussion guidelines and norms, generally we encourage folks to speak from their own experiences, engage in respectful discourse and public comments, and be as present as you can during today's session. The goals of today's meeting are as follows. So first, we'll recap the sources of feedback and highlight the goals of the task force. We'll share with you all the draft city plan framework, and then we'll make time to discuss and refine draft city plan strategies. Okay, so first we'll review the pit count data. So this graph shows the number of people who are experiencing homelessness on a single day and night in January or February based on the point in time count data. So the orange bars on this graph show the number of people in the county as a whole, and the yellow bars show the number of people in the city of Santa Clara specifically. We've showed this graph through 2019 during our first task force meeting, and we've updated it here with the data from February 2022. So we can see that the number of people that were counted in both the county and in the city of Santa Clara increased in 2022. And for anyone who's interested in learning more, data for all city jurisdictions will be available on the county website soon. So now we'll go ahead and launch into some feedback sources and themes. So we've based the city plan draft framework and priority areas you'll see today on the following feedback sources. Some focus groups with service providers, people with lived experience, and city staff. 12 interviews with people with lived experience of homelessness. The feedback that we provided and gathered through the last 5 homelessness task force meetings, a virtual community forum open to the public with 70 plus participants, a business community survey with 270 plus responses, and public comment emails sent to Homebase throughout this process, as well as additional feedback and information shared with Homebase by city staff. So now we'll walk through some general themes of feedback and the gaps and needs identified through this process. Many of the ideas that we've received from these groups and meetings focus on reducing the impacts of homelessness on the community. So some things that we heard throughout this process were that parks and other public spaces do not feel safe and welcoming for all community members. We've heard repeatedly also from residents, providers, and city staff that there are not enough resources to address trash removal and public health concerns, as well as not enough funding for the Parks Department to increase trash removal services. People have also highlighted the need to increase access mental health and substance use services and increase outreach, especially for people who may be hesitant to accept services initially. City staff need more resources and training to be better equipped to interact with people experiencing homelessness at parks and libraries and other public spaces. Businesses require more support to reduce the impacts on their business. For example, safety concerns, economic impacts, and concerns about property damage as well. And community members lack knowledge about resources in the community and what to know and how to help and connect people to services. Next, there were also repeated comments about the need to address the root causes of homelessness. So building off of the need to reduce these impacts, community members needed more education and engagement opportunities to build connection and understanding among housed and unhoused residents. There is an extreme lack of an affordable housing within the city, which is a key driver of homelessness. And it's also a large barrier to ending homelessness in the city. Changes to local housing policy are needed to allow for development of more housing for people with extremely low income and also more supportive housing to keep people in housing and prevent homelessness. Finding sites for development of affordable housing is extremely challenging and can be impeded by community opposition. Residents require more legal protections against eviction, anti-rent gouging, and security deposit limits. And there are also not enough accessible education and living wage opportunities for people trying to increase their income to obtain housing and maintain stability. We also heard a need for expansion of homelessness prevention and housing programs, and the need to have these resources close by within the city to increase access for city residents. So more extremely low income housing and supportive housing are needed to meet community needs, as well as more localized and population-specific programs and services, such as programs for older adults and young adults located within the city. Available resources and ways to access them are currently unclear for people who are unhoused, as well as community members and service providers trying to provide connections to those services. There's also a need to ensure adequate funding for supportive services attached to extremely low income housing and supportive housing developments so that they're well integrated into the neighborhood. And lastly, for this point, centering the voices of those with lived experience as the city considers funding, policies, and changes that impact those who are unhoused. And lastly, we heard that folks want to improve the quality of life for unsheltered individuals. So again, we heard loud and clear from most feedback sources that there's a need for a targeted and city-specific outreach team, especially to proactively engage folks who are hesitant to accept services. There are also not enough temporary housing and shelter sites within the city. So more and different models are needed, such as safe parking sites or interim housing sites. And stronger coordination between the city, county behavioral health services, and service providers is needed to streamline access to services. So before we get into the framework for the city plan and proposed strategies, we also wanted to briefly call back to the goals for this city plan from our first task force meeting. So this task force as a group has recognized and affirmed the following goals: that home base and the city are able to write a strategic plan informed by the task force and community feedback, that to align the city plan with the community plan to end homelessness, create a bold but achievable and actionable plan and not just a plan that sits on the shelf, as well as focus on the city of Santa Clara while recognizing that homelessness is a regional issue and emphasize regional collaboration. Also centering the voice of lived experience in this plan and thinking beyond just housing to a number of services and supports that people will need in all areas of life. So these are our overall goals as a group, and the strategies that we're presenting today will reflect these priorities. And in addition to the goals we set out, all of the strategies you'll see today are meant to address the needs and gaps that have been identified by the Homelessness Task Force, available data, community feedback processes, and public comment and city staff. So you'll see that the strategies in the following slides consider the collective needs of all community members, are aligned with the city adopted community plan to end homelessness, are grounded in best practices, and honor the lived experience of people experiencing homelessness. And I'll now pass it off to Carla to present the draft city plan framework.
Great, thank you so much, Joy. Now that Joy has shared like the themes from the feedback that we've received from various sources and also reviewed the goals of the city plan, we're going to turn our attention now on the strategies in the draft city plan that address the feedback, the gaps, and the needs that we've heard throughout this process. So all task force members received a copy of the draft city plan framework for you to be able to reference. And for members of the public, it's also posted on the city's Homelessness Task Force website as well. There's a lot within that document, and for the interest of time, I'll be mentioning just a few of the strategies within each priority area. But task force members and members of the public, please feel free to ask questions and reach out to the home base team if anything does come up after this meeting. We've allocated the second half of the meeting for task force discussion, so hopefully that'll give us time to dive in deeper if you had any deeper questions. So on this slide are the 6 priority areas. Each of these priority areas are broad and based on feedback we heard throughout our outreach and throughout the community engagement process. I'm not going to read each of these priority areas in this moment because in the next few slides, we're going to delve into each priority area. As well as like the strategies that kind of fall into each of them. But we wanted to give you a visual of the 6 broad buckets that are sort of the pillars of the draft city plan. Next slide. So before we jump into the first priority area, we sort of just wanted to go over like the structure of the draft city plan framework document itself. For each priority area, we've included objectives, which are what the strategies in each priority area are meant to accomplish or to address. We've also included the existing efforts to show what the city is already doing to address each of these priority areas. And note that the strategies in the city plan framework are intended to build off of what is already happening within the city. Additionally, each of the priority areas falls into one or more of the 3 strategy areas from the county-wide community plan to end homelessness. So we've indicated under each priority area which county plan strategy they align with to sort of help put the city plan into a more regional context. And then last but not least, the meat of the framework are the proposed strategies. And this is what we're going to focus most of our time on today and what I'm going to go through in the next few slides. Before we begin, does anyone have any questions about sort of just the structure of the framework itself? Okay, great. So let's get started with priority area 1, which is conduct proactive street outreach with the goal of assessing people for supportive housing. Now, the objective of this priority area is to ensure that people experiencing homelessness in the city are getting assessed through the county-wide coordinated entry system, which connects people to supportive housing, and also to build rapport and proactively engage folks and increase connections to behavioral health services for people that need those services. Now, the first priority area is in response to some feedback that we heard about the need for better connection to mental health and substance use services, the need to ensure that all public spaces like parks and libraries are safe and welcoming for all, as well as making sure that folks know what resources are actually available and how to access them. In terms of sort of current and existing ongoing efforts within the city's police department has a community response team that conducts outreach while they're not in uniform to respond to crises and connect people experiencing homelessness in the city to existing services. So, just keeping in mind that all the sub-strategies within this first priority area are going to build off of the police department's existing efforts. So just to mention a couple of the sub-strategies that you see on the slide, I'm not going to talk about all of them or mention all of them, but just a couple of them. One is to fund a coordinated street and encampment outreach team serving the city that includes staff from different disciplines, including healthcare, behavioral health, and housing navigation. Another of the sub-strategies under this priority area is to improve coordination with the county's Office of Supportive Housing and the county's Behavioral Health Services Office to increase access to reliable and timely options for responding to crises that require a clinical response or de-escalation. So next slide. So moving on to priority area number 2, which is to address the basic needs of people living outside, including shelter, health, and hygiene. So the objective of this priority area is to really create opportunities for engagement, connection, and trust building with people living unsheltered by providing resources to meet basic needs and build a foundation for making progress toward their housing goals. It is also to improve the accessibility and experience of public areas throughout the city for both housed and unhoused community members. This priority area, it came in response to feedback we heard about the need to foster safe and welcoming public spaces. We heard some concerns about public health and sanitation, so this is also in response to that type of feedback. And we heard feedback about current gaps in local services available in the community. So this priority area is also addressing that feedback. In terms of existing efforts going on in the city, currently the city is partnering with several service providers to provide mobile shower and laundry services, case management, support services for survivors of domestic violence, and emergency shelter and transitional housing beds for youth experiencing homelessness. So that's sort of kind of what's going on right now. And these sub-strategies, once again, are meant to build off of those current efforts. A couple of the sub-strategies under this priority area include assessing current services being offered, such as hygiene, shower, bio-waste, and laundry services, to determine the best times and locations to really provide these services and expand the access and participation from those that need those services. Another sub-strategy within this priority area is to establish safe and welcoming places for people living unsheltered to access, such as day centers. The next slide, please. So now moving on to priority area number 3, to build community understanding of the causes, the needs, and the experience of homelessness. The objective of this priority area is really to build community support for new housing developments or programs for people experiencing homelessness in the city, and also to sort of foster a greater understanding, support, and stronger sense of overall community by increasing connections between housed and unhoused community members. This priority area is in response to feedback we heard from folks wanting to know more about how they can help people experiencing homelessness, the need for more community education around the root causes of homelessness, as well as the desire for more engagement and forums to talk about homelessness in the city. In terms of existing efforts, the city recently held the community forum event, which I know some of you were able to attend, as part of the work of the task force and as part of developing this plan. And that community forum event really offered community members the opportunity to discuss the issue with task force members and other members of the community. People expressed interest in wanting more events similar to that one. Now, to move on to some of the sub-strategies within this priority area, some of them include engaging people with lived experience of homelessness to inform decision-making about funding, housing development, and to support community education efforts. And then another sub-strategy is providing more opportunities for members of the public to learn about homelessness and the root causes of homelessness. All right. Priority area number 4 is to reduce the impacts of unsheltered homelessness throughout the city. The objectives of this priority area are to ensure that there are safe and healthy community spaces for all city residents, to leverage collective community resources to really create efficient and impactful interventions, and finally, to really improve interactions between people experiencing homelessness and housed community members. This is a key priority area that is meant to address really strong feedback that we heard throughout this process regarding the need to make public spaces like parks safe and welcoming for all community members, addressing trash removal and public health concerns, and reducing impacts on businesses in the city, among other feedback. In terms of current efforts going on in the city currently contracts with Tucker Construction to provide cleanup services at encampments and other areas where cleanup is needed. And as you can see, there are a lot of sub-strategies under this priority area. We actually had to do 2 different slides for the same priority area. So I'm only going to mention a couple from each slide. One of the sub-strategies under this priority area is to develop city protocols to triage crises and concerns. Another sub-strategy under this priority area is to explore opportunities to implement innovative models for safe parking throughout the city, as well as providing additional emergency shelter and interim housing until more permanent housing is available. Next slide. So like I said, continuing with priority area 4, another sub-strategy within this priority area is to explore partnerships with Valley Water, the county, Caltrans, railroads, businesses, nonprofits, and other partners to leverage funding, facilities, expertise, and staffing to really support bio-waste and trash cleanup throughout the city. Another sub-strategy is to create mechanisms to supplement existing sanitation and safety efforts throughout the city, recognizing that in order for this to happen, more resources are needed. Next slide. So priority area number 5, to create broad-based support for interim and permanent supportive housing, as well as housing for extremely low-income households across the city. The objectives of this priority area are to use all the tools available to the city to increase housing affordability, especially at extremely low income levels. Another objective of this priority area is to reduce opposition to new developments at all stages. This priority area is in response to feedback we heard regarding the need to address the root causes of homelessness, one of which is the high cost of housing in the city. It is also in response to the feedback regarding the need to educate the community about homelessness. In terms of current efforts, the city has invested in 1,286 units of affordable housing, and 306 of these units are extremely low income. The city also currently invests in intensive case management for individuals residing in permanent supportive housing. Some of the sub-strategies under this priority area include prioritizing available city resources like home ARP, CDBG, and local general funds to fund extremely low income and supportive housing development. Another strategy is to explore amendments to the city's housing-related policies to make it easier and less expensive to build affordable housing. And another one is to address this priority area is to develop a protocol in collaboration with stakeholders to ensure that when there are extremely low income or supportive housing developments, that they're able to successfully integrate into the community at large. Next slide. Oh, yes, I already talked about this. Sorry about that, guys. So this is sort of continuing off of priority area 5. So priority area 6. So this is the last priority area that we're going to kind of talk about before we move on to public comment and the task force discussion. Priority area 6 is to really prevent homelessness for city residents at risk. The objective of this priority area is to reduce the inflow into homelessness among city residents that are at imminent risk of losing their housing, and also to increase the availability of services within the city for city residents. This priority area is really in response to feedback that we heard about the need to prevent the trauma of experiencing homelessness altogether, and to address the root causes of homelessness for the many people who are on the brink of homelessness in the city. Currently, in terms of prevention, the city funds tenant-based rental assistance for families with children who are homeless, or families who are fleeing domestic violence situations. The city also currently contributes to the county-wide homelessness prevention system and provides emergency rental assistance and landlord-tenant mediation. There are just 2 sub-strategies under this priority area, and they are investing additional city funds in the countywide homelessness prevention system to be able to provide services within the city and to really increase access to prevention services for city residents. And then also to implement stronger protections to prevent people from losing their housing through eviction, rent increases, or other forms of displacement. Now I'm just going to take a breath. I know that was a lot of information for everyone and just kind of talking at you all. We're now going to move into sort of our public comment section. So an opportunity for members of the public to be able to respond to the draft city plan, and Joy will talk about that more. And then we are going to move on to our task force discussion and Q&A to allow the task force to, ask any questions, talk about anything that's on their mind in regards to this framework. So now I will go ahead and pass it over to my colleague, Joy.
Great. Thanks, Carla. Okay, so as Carla said, now we're going to be opening up the floor for a brief public comment period. So the purpose of this activity is to hear any comments on the draft framework that was just presented from the members of the general public that are attending this meeting today. So in order to be called on for public comment, we ask that you please use the Zoom raise hand function to be called. And then we will promote folks to panelists in the order that we see hands raised. And this will allow you to come off of mute and give your comment verbally. So we've reserved 1 minute per speaker and encourage folks offering public comment to remain within those limits, as well as engage in civil discourse. So Eli will have a timer on his screen and will facilitate introducing new speakers for comment. And I'll go ahead and stop sharing our slides.
Thanks, Joy.
And yeah.
So before we get into public comment, I see a couple of folks already raising their hands. Thank you so much. We've got you in the order that they're raised. I want to point to the chat. We put a link in the chat to the draft strategies document that's posted on the city website. And that's a great reference to have as we're discussing. Task force members, if you want to have that up, take a look. Attendees, if you want to dig into that document, it's there. If during the task force discussion, we want to share those slides again so we can all look at something in particular together, just let us know. But as a default, we're going to have everybody's lovely faces up. Okay, so for public comment, we're going to do 1 minute per person who wants to share. You should also feel free to put your comments in the actual Zoom chat as well if you prefer not to come off mute, if you prefer not to be on mic. So I've just enabled the chat feature for everyone. We just ask that you, again, remember that this is a public forum and we really want to hear everybody's opinions and we want to be able to engage in polite and civil conversation. But yeah, please feel free to put your comments in the chat as well. Okay, so the first public comment we have is going to be from Jeff Houston. I'll wait till you're promoted to panelist to start the timer. All right, go ahead, Jeff. Jeff, you should be able to unmute yourself. If you're talking, we're not, oh, there you go.
Hi, I was
Go for
hoping that the city staff could bring us up to date on the mobile shower and laundry service. And that's all I have to ask for.
Okay, does someone from the city want to take that now, or do we want to hold that for the discussion period or offline?
We can answer all the questions at the end.
Okay, great. Excellent. So we will go to Samantha Somers. All right, Samantha, you should now be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, I actually wanted to respond to that last question real quick because I actually am the case manager for Dignity on Wheels. Currently, we are doing shower and laundry services on Thursday night, and we are starting to see a lot more clients out here because our clients do come out more at night. And then I had a question about my concern is that a lot of what I'm seeing is that a lot of low income places aren't low income enough. A lot of our clients are older and have a set SSI amount that pretty much their rent that's what it is. And my other concern is for I believe you said that there was going to be a police force going out and doing homeless outreach, correct?
There is a police outreach team currently.
My concern with that is that a lot of people are also have a criminal background.
Unfortunately, Samantha, that is time, but thank you so much. Okay. We have our next hand, which is Kim Short. Thanks for your patience as we get people in and out of our panelist position here. So Kim, you should be getting an invitation to become a panelist. Okay, there we go. And you can go ahead and unmute yourself, Kim. Kim, if you're talking, we can't hear you at the moment. I think you might be very, very quiet.
Eli, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
This is Jennifer. They did post a question in the chat, so maybe if we just make note of that, maybe that person prefers just a chat instead of.
Great. Thank you. Kim, I can hear you asking, can you hear me? But it's so faint. If you're able to share your comments in the chat, that might be easier at this point. Sorry about that. Okay, next up we have Don Smith. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Don.
All right, I think I got it. Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
So I'm a property owner on Saratoga Creek and for about 17 years. And over the last 2 years, there's been a camp that has been set up basically right behind my fence. And I guess in terms of the recommendations and things that I have seen, I think we have to watch some of the gaps. So I think residents like me are highly impacted on things like safety and stuff, as well as parks and schools and other public places. So I think there's some gaps with things like the creek that are controlled by Valley Water and the city, as well as residents as opposed to public spaces. So I just like the task force to consider those gaps and help that.
Thank you for your comment, Don. And next we have Judy. Judy Hubbard. Okay. Looks like we may have lost Judy. There we go.
Hi, I have two questions. One is, you had said that Tucker Construction provides cleanup for the homeless encampments. Sorry, what about the motorhomes that are off of Lafayette, Hope Drive, that type of thing? I know that they throw garbage over the people's fences in their backyard, and it's kind of like a stigma. People don't like the homeless there because they're ruining their property. So what do? It takes both the homelessness and the city to improve it, but the homelessness can't be negligent in what they're doing.
All right. And did you have another comment, Judy?
I did. Now I can't remember it. It's okay. We'll just stick with that one. That's a big main. Oh, I know. So the other thing is homelessness is around the businesses, and they're ruining people's business because they're peeing in front of.
Unfortunately, that is time.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Judy. But thank you so much for your comment.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to raise their hand? Okay, I see another hand. Make that switch, Carla. Excellent. All right, you should be able to unmute yourself.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Several people have commented on specific issues in their neighborhood. And I haven't really attended any of these meetings, so you may have done this kind of thing before. But I know as an engineer, what's often useful is to kind of just lay out a bunch of scenarios, like someone's walking down the street dressed inappropriately. You've got a tent here, you got 20 tents here, you got this situation, that situation. And then as part of your analysis, go through a scenario that describes what exactly the expected response is with a timeline. And that can really help focus on what resources you need to take care of the common complaints that you get in crisis situations. And it also provides a way to measure success. So I don't know if you've done something like that, but I think that's something like that would be extremely useful in any kind of planning process like you're going through. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for your comment. And if you do want to come off mic, we do have a little bit more time for a public comment. I'm going to read some of the comments that we've gotten in the chat. So again, please bring us up to date on shower and laundry service that the city is offering. Does the city of Santa Clara have a budget for homelessness? With an increase of homelessness, we've also seen an increase in RVs being parked on streets for long, extended periods of time. Do we have a plan to address these RVs? We have seen a large increase in crime and abandoned vehicles. However, the city isn't enforcing their policies. Another comment, have we developed a project plan to assign roles and responsibilities to the city plan framework so we can begin to move forward? And do we have fundraising ideas to complement the city's budget? Another comment, additionally, the city has informed us that they are unable to remove those vehicles due to biohazards. Is the task force able to assist with the removal of these RVs or able to tag the ones who haven't moved in 3 to 30 days? And another comment, are we still working with Life Moves, and does the city have another place we can propose other than Cabrillo Lawrence location? Someplace near a bus stop, but not in the neighborhood. And one more comment in the chat. Pardon me if this has already been discussed. Is the task force discussing best practices with other like city governments? For example, Twin Cities, Minnesota, Salt Lake City, Utah, etc. Okay. And then I see a question in the Q&A also. I think we can take as public comment. So how will the park address homelessness in the park area? There are a few questions here. If we want to start addressing the questions that have come in, there are a few for city staff.
Which ones did you want to start with? Do you want to sort of tee them up for us, Eli? The questions?
Absolutely. So can we get an update on shower and laundry service the city is offering?
Yeah, as we heard from Samantha, who I haven't met yet, so nice to meet you, Samantha. We did change the location, sorry, not the location, the day and the time. Previously, we were doing Monday mornings, and so we wanted to try evenings because we thought that might be more convenient. So that change was made about a month ago, and so we're told from We Hope that it does take time for people to sort of develop the trust that it's going to be there. So we are hearing that it's starting to increase in usage. So that's once a week, every Thursday.
Great, thank you. And we had another question. Does the city of Santa Clara have a budget for homelessness?
Not directly. We do have a one-time amount of funding called Home ARP funding, which was a special type of funding that HUD entitled or kind of assigned to the city. So we do have to go through some kind of red tape to get access to that money. We have to make a plan. So we're using this plan as our base, and then we have to add a few things to that. So that is less than $2 million of one-time funding that is earmarked specifically for homelessness. There's also PHLA money, which is state money that can be used It's primarily meant for developing affordable housing, but it can be used in very limited circumstances for street outreach and case management. So that's another source that we could potentially look at as well.
Okay. And then we have a question about, so in some of the current work that's referenced is cleanups around encampments. Is there similar cleanup efforts to address RV locations?
So Eli, I could probably take this one. So the city currently has restrictions on parking as it pertains to RVs. A couple of them that come to mind are signage that says, like, you can't park a vehicle over 20 feet in certain areas. More oftentimes we get with these RVs, particularly on Bassett and Hope, it's, you can't have a vehicle standing in a particular location for over 72 hours. So the police department will go out and we will do what's called orange tagging, which is like a warning and says, hey, this vehicle has been there for over 72 hours, needs to, be moved. If we go back later and it's still there after they've been warned and then get a citation, we go back and return another time or for a third time, that would be the point that we would tow them. Traditionally, what's happened is these RVs where folks are living in them, if they're in a particularly bad state, and typically they are, there's biohazard waste, broken septic tanks, whatever. For us to tow that, the tow companies would have to be made whole to be able to conduct those cleanups. And it's incredibly expensive. We've had estimates from $5,000 to $6,000 per RV. Not to mention, they have to keep the RVs for 15 days. And you can imagine the RVs take up a lot of space. We only have 2 contract tows for the city. So the bottom line is we need more funding. If the city were dedicated to funding the cleanups of these RVs, we have a plan in place where Tucker Construction has actually agreed to come in and do the cleanup of the RVs. And that's on paper, A to Z, completely worked out. We just need the money to actually do that. And until that happens, we are unable to do those tows. And then the problem keeps growing. As you see on some of these problematic cities, the police department's incredibly, frustrated with everybody else. And we're very much aware of it. We just need the money.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Next question is, have we developed a project plan to assign roles and responsibilities for the city plan framework? Adam, would you like to take that? Would you like?
That's a great question. So the answer is not yet, but that's absolutely an important next step. So after tonight, we conclude the task force. We will have this framework out for public comment through the beginning of December. And we're planning on coming back to City Council with a study session in early 2023 to get their sort of input on this framework. And once we have that, then we can start to prioritize and figure out what are the things we can start off with, what do we have resources for, and what do we need to find resources for. So part of it is a function of narrowing down and really getting agreement from our elected officials on what they want to spend staff time on, as well as how to get it done in terms of resources.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question was also related to implementation and budget. Are there fundraising ideas to complement the city's budget? Adam, I think you may have addressed that in your previous answers. Anything you'd add?
I mean, those are a starting point. I think depending on what is proposed, $1 million doesn't go so far these days. So, we'll definitely need to be creative and to look for funding outside the city as well.
And again, Sergeant Dega, your answer about your description of approach to RVs may have addressed this, but there's a specific question. Is the task force able to assist with the removal of RVs? And specifically, this person has heard that from the city that they're unable to remove vehicles due to biohazards. Not sure if you addressed that in your answer or if I missed it.
Yeah, kind of. It's what I said. The biohazard component of that is the most costly. And if we don't have the funding to be able to bring like a Tucker Construction or someone similar in to do those the tow companies aren't going to do it. These are tow truck drivers, and they can't be expected to go in and remove human waste and whatnot. So we just need to have, again, the funding to be able to bring in a party that's willing to do that, which we have them on board. We just need to be able to pay them to do that so we can properly dispose of these vehicles.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question. Has the task force been discussing best practices with other like city governments, for example, Twin Cities, Salt Lake City, etc.?
Yeah. Go ahead. Jump in.
No, I could speak a little bit to some of the discussions the task force had, and then Adam, if I miss anything. We have talked about sort of different approaches. We haven't brought in any specific research or examples from other communities, but the information that we've brought and that some of our task force members have brought is definitely informed by best practices. We've talked about things like low barrier approaches, housing first approaches, and there have been discussion of some sort of specific like types of interventions like outreach, temporary housing, shelter, how that's different from permanent housing. Adam, is there anything you'd add?
Yeah, I'll add that we actually did a field trip out to see emergency interim housing in San Jose on Monterey Road, and Sergeant Deeger and Jennifer and Kat, one of our task force members, and I forget, there might have been one or two other folks, forgive me if I forget, but it was really, I mean, that's pretty innovative. We don't see that in all parts of the country, and it was great to be able to visit that and see it firsthand and tour that with Andrea to see that site. So I think the answer is yes, we are, looking for creative ways to respond. We're open to, ideas as they come in. It's, and we are reaching out to other cities. Hillary Baroga here on our task force is coordinating between cities. So we've been working with Hillary on that as well.
Thanks, Adam. We're going to do a couple more of the questions from the chat. So please feel free to keep putting your questions in the chat. If we don't have time to get to them and answer them directly, we'll still sort of take them with us. Okay. So question from Sandy, big question. Is there a way to address drug addiction? Is there anybody who'd like to speak to that? I have a few thoughts. I can speak to some of the behavioral health stuff that we've discussed in the task force. So behavioral health, mental health, substance use has definitely come up as a concern. Some of the strategies that are in the draft framework include sort of building on connections with county mental health services, including crisis outreach response, and just having those connections and how to get people connected and when that is appropriate more clear, and share more information about that with the community, with city staff, with folks who are doing outreach in the city. So that's one example of how that's addressed. In addition, things like supportive housing is a really great intervention for folks who have substance use that's interfering with their ability to maintain housing, because that provides connections to things like recovery programs, and also just can provide support to someone whose substance use is sort of interfering with that stability. Anything that I missed, Adam or Greg?
I could hop in real quick. One of the things that we saw with the passing of Proposition 47, Proposition 57, a few years back, was that when you reduced drug possession from felony to misdemeanor, there was also less of a a mechanism to kind of force people into drug rehabilitation, because now sometimes these crimes aren't even prosecuted at the DA level. And if they are, they're viewed at such a low level kind of misdemeanor, perspective that you don't have that mechanism to kind of force people to get the help that they need. And that's certainly limited our ability to kind of, use the justice system to try to get people into that space where they can try to get some help.
Thanks for that.
Hi, everybody. Can I just kind of chime in there?
Yeah.
Hi. Sorry, I've been traveling, so I just got home. Our drug and alcohol systems and mental health systems really aren't set up to serve the people who are unhoused in our communities right now. And it's really going to take all of us coming to the table and demanding change, systemic change in those systems in order to make it work. So right now, if somebody's unhoused and they want treatment, they have to call a phone number, and they can wait on the phone for hours for somebody to actually take that call and make an appointment. And the appointment most likely will be a month out, and it will be outpatient only. We know that those services do not work for somebody living in a camp. It's the same thing for our mental health systems. We don't have beds associated with our systems that can help the unhoused community get well and stay well. So until we really truly address those systemic issues, it's going to be very difficult to make traction in this area.
Okay. Thanks, Andrea. And we have about 1 more minute before we need to move on to our task force discussion piece. I think. Okay, maybe a quick, we talked about RVs, we talked about biohazard waste. Is there a way, the question is, can we provide biohazard waste disposal for RVs? Can we bring facilities to the RV and allow them to dump? What would be the price tag for that type of cleanup?
Well, real quick, just for clarification, the biohazard waste that we're talking about is not some of it is in septic tanks, that are in RVs, but a lot of this is like the actual interior of the RVs. And I wish I could show you some photos. The interiors are atrocious. It's really bad. And some of this stuff is actually in the actual interior living space. So it's not a matter of just bringing somewhere, some sort of entity there to dump the septic tank, but it's the cost that is required to actually clean out the entire interior of the RV.
Yeah, I think Mountain View had been looking into that as well. So we can follow up with them to see. They've been having similar issues. And again, a different issue is there a way for someone to responsibly dispose of that? And I think they were trying to figure that out as well, but I'm not sure what they ended up with.
All right, thank you all. We really appreciate everybody who's in attendance here. And also, we are going to leave the chat open. So if you have additional comment you want to provide, absolutely, the chat will be open for a bit, so you can continue to put those comments in the chat as the task force is getting into their, big beefy discussion today about these strategies. And thanks City Friends and others who helped address some of the questions that came up. All right, so task force members, we are doing the thing. We have a draft set of strategies that Joy presented, Carla presented, and you also have, again, I put a link to that document in the chat. We want to get your feedback on these strategies. This is sort of what we've been building towards. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to do this in a couple of different ways. We're going to start with general discussion, and I'm gonna cut off that general open discussion, which is sort of our typical mode, in time to give each task force member an uninterrupted 2 minutes to give us your feedback on these strategies. We want to have this open general discussion first so you can all hear each other, get different perspectives, and then, but we also want to protect time because we want to hear each of your individual voices. So we want to make sure everybody both has a time to be heard and you have time to interact with each other. But to kick off the discussion, because I know that this is a fairly long document, it covers a lot of ground because you all have covered a lot of ground in the past 5 meetings. So I want to start with some more straightforward, simple ways of getting your feedback. So I'm going to put 3 poll questions up on your Zoom. You should see them now. And I'm going to read through each of these 3 poll questions. We just want to take a little bit of a temperature check. So asking about the draft strategies document in particular. The first question is, do you see things in that draft strategies document that are important to you? Or at least some of the stuff that was important to you during this process is reflected in that document? Yes, no, unsure. Second question, poll question that you should be seeing is, are there important things that are missing from the draft strategies? Just generally, like something that you think is hugely important and it's not in there. So we want to know yes, no, or I'm unsure. And then the third question we have for you is overall, again, temperature check. How are you feeling about the draft as it is now? That can be anywhere from it is fantastic, it's exactly what I was hoping, to it's good, but I think it needs a little work. Maybe you're not sure, that's okay too. Maybe you would change a few things, you have a few concerns, or you would make a lot of substantive changes, right? So where are you on this scale here? I'm going to give it a little time. I can't see who you are in the responses, but I can see how many of our folks have responded. So I'm going to wait until we get at least.
Eli, it says on the bottom, host and panelists cannot vote. Does that mean?
That's such a good point.
Okay.
That's such a good point. Let's go back to those settings because we do want our task force members to participate. Joy, are you able to change settings here so that?
Yeah, I'm taking a look right now.
I think I just changed it to allow panelists to vote.
Yep, you got it.
Okay. Then let me re-bring up those polls. Just refresh. Okay. Relaunching that poll. So now panelists, you should be seeing and you should be able, or task force members, you should be able to answer those questions. And I'm going to track to see when we have a good percentage of folks participating. Okay. We're at about half. We can get a few more. Okay. We have a little over half of our folks. No, we have a good number of folks participating. Just jumped. So I'm going to end the poll and we're going to take a look. Super helpful. It looks like we've got very valid, some folks that are unsure. And Andrea, I hear you. There was a limited amount of time to review before this meeting. We absolutely recognize that. And a PowerPoint presentation of stuff that is this broad and covers so much ground can be difficult to fully absorb for sure. So the unsure totally makes sense. And I'm seeing that at least most folks who are able to absorb the content see something that's important to them. And that's really good to see. Like, we really want to know that at least something that is important to you is the diverse community members that we've had involved in this process is reflected. We also see that maybe there are some important things that are missing. So we'll definitely want to hear from you about those things in your feedback. And a good range of how folks are just generally feeling about the draft. I hope that we can get a lot of the positive stuff that you like, but also what's missing for you, what your concerns are, what you would want to see changed as we get your specific feedback. So thanks for that. That's helpful. Okay. Next slide, please. So these are our general discussion questions, just to prompt. You can share anything that you like in this discussion, of course, but if you're thinking about what are we looking for in this discussion, we're interested in, absolutely, do you have any clarifying questions about anything that Carla presented or anything that you had a chance to read in the plan? We want to get those first, if possible, so that we can get those clarifying questions on the table and out of the way. And then in this plan, what are your highest priorities? Is there anything missing? Any other feedback that you have about these strategies? And task force members, I'm going to ask that you raise your hand and we can call on you just as usual. And we're going to have open discussion for about half hour of open discussion. Looks like. Go ahead, Anne.
Thanks. Great report. Really, really helpful framework. I agree that there wasn't really enough time for me personally to review it thoroughly enough to speak clearly about this. So I'm at a disadvantage on that. But a couple clarifying questions that I have is about the process. And I think that Adam mentioned that the next step would be that this report goes to the city council for approval. And I just want to get some better understanding of what that process or approval process is. And I ask because the other part of the question is it an all or nothing thing? Is it the city council might say, I like this and this, but not that. We don't have any money. It's all dead on arrival. You know, is the city council ready to receive this and actually do something with it? Or are they all going to be blindsided and we have this report that goes nowhere? You know what I mean? I don't have any context for how well the pump is primed for this to really move forward. And I wondered if you could give some context on that.
Great question. Is there someone from the city who wants to address that?
I can start, and Andrew, if you want to add to it, please do. So the city has done some study sessions on homelessness over the last 2 years. I believe there's some before I was here, you know, when we were talking about home key and some other things. So I do believe the city council is primed to some point. And I think that some of the topics we're bringing up might be new topics for them as well. So our intention is to give the public some time to absorb the report, and then to do a study session in early 2023 with the city council to help with exactly what you're saying, Ann, is to help sort of bridge that gap between what we heard in this process and help them absorb that, and then give us some feedback so that we're not going off and, to your point, writing something that, you know, they don't intend on us to work on. So part of this is learning from the process and the data and the input and feedback that we received.
So this is kind of an iterative process with the city council come January or whatever. what we're doing tonight is not the end product. It's going to be a work. This is a work in progress.
Yeah, I would think it would need at least 2 council meetings before this could be finalized. So
Okay.
one study session, and then a final document coming back, you know, a month or 2 later. That would be my guess.
So that means that the elements of this, some of these elements could change dramatically or be removed or.
Well, you know, I think, you know, feedback is feedback. So I think we will capture the feedback and share that. Now, what we do with the feedback and the actions that we take, you know, we're directed by our city council and our elected officials. So if they decide to direct us in certain ways, that's their right to do that. But we will get the information is there, and the information that we gain from this process is there. And so I think that's important. An important first step is to understand the issue. And we know there'll be challenges in this budget environment trying to find ways to pay for some of these initiatives. And so to the extent that we can find resources, that will help a lot, I think. That's probably the primary concern, is how do you pay for some of this stuff?
Thank you. That actually was my other question. You know, there's no reference really to money in here in budget. And that was the one thing that I felt was missing, that we have no context for what price tags would be on the kinds of things that we're asking. That, you know, I agree that everything in there is great stuff, but if you have to start prioritizing of those pieces, how much are those things going to cost?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we didn't want to limit the process before we even got started. So we wanted to just truly understand what's needed, and then try to see how we can kind of grow the resources to meet that need. It won't be easy, but we didn't want to sort of cut off anything until we know what the needs were. So I think it's helpful for us to know what's needed.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Adam. I'm going to go to you, Ray, but before that, I want to remind task force members, especially because we know that there was a limited period of time for you to look at this document. We can share those slides that have the strategies on them. If you'd like to look at anything in particular, just let us know. Go ahead, Ray.
Thanks, Zoe. Yeah, I mean, I think the plan, I think that the best aspects of the plan is that it does a good job of aligning to the countywide community plan to end homelessness. And particularly, I was starting to see the permanent housing strategies and prevention strategies in 5 and 6. I haven't had a chance to dig in too much, but I would say, and you know, Adam, your comment about not limiting before the process gets started, where I've seen city-specific plans being more effective is when there are some metric goals. And I, you know, in my cursory examination, I don't see any housing targets. I don't see any services targets. I see goals like adding more money to the prevention system and centralizing services in Santa Clara County. But, you know, how many slots do you want to try? You know, where would you like that system to grow to by in the next 3 years or whatever the duration of this plan is? So I would like to see how, you know, is there a way to get a little bit more concrete, knowing that, you know, budget, you know, there's going to be budgetary restrictions, there's going to be other challenges, and we can identify what those cost challenges are once we identify what the goals we want to reach. But I don't know if that's pulling in RENA for the housing goals or however you want to go about doing it, but it would be great to see a little bit more of that. And I'm stealing a line from Vivian right now because we've been chatting back and forth, but I also do think it's important to separate interim housing from permanent housing. I think the two should not be combined. I think it's confusing. They're different strategies, they have different approaches, they have different outcomes. I think intermingling the two will make it hard to track and see what the progress really is. Sorry to steal that from you, Vivian.
Anybody else have questions or want to request that we take a look at any of the strategies or all of the strategies again on the screen? Go ahead, Vivian.
Well, I don't know if it's so much, I guess it's a question in the first strategy. Was any thought given to the word assessing is also striking me. Like the point of outreach isn't to assess people for coordinated entry. The point of outreach is to help people access housing, right? So I think that we need to be really clear in our communication. And one of the tools to access housing is, yes, assessment from coordinated entry, but I think it's too focused on that. And then the priority 1 and 2, I just think there's a lot of overlap in, and sometimes having more strategies isn't super helpful. So I might recommend some folding of strategies together, because I think both sort of are really connected.
Vivian, can you elaborate a little bit on some of those other housing access tools and strategies that you see commonly?
So one of the, in priority area 2, you're talking a lot about where people could go to have, to find dignity and whatnot. Those are actually places where outreach actually is super effective as we're giving, giving resources to folks. That's where we can connect. Like it's people just going out asking people how they're doing and whatnot is fine, but it's great if we bring something with it, food, showers, whatnot. It's the engagement piece. It's not on priority area 1 that I feel is it could be articulated a little more strongly, in that someone's name comes up on a list is not enough to, that's not enough. Like you have to have someone that cares about that person, who's connected with that person. That's how people get into housing. Not only, oh, great, they're on the list, their name will come up, fantastic, we'll get them in housing in a minute. No. Their name comes up, they're not engaged with anyone, they don't trust the system, they're not going to go into housing anyway. So that's my point, that I want it to be more about access instead of assess.
Thanks for that, Vivian. Okay, thanks, Andrea. We hope that you can come back on with a stronger connection. Any other comments, questions, areas you want to dig into more? Go ahead, Anne.
It seems, again, this is from a very brief review of the document, but basically providing housing seems to be a lesser priority. Oh, I don't know where it is in the list, actually. There's a lot of other elements, but the idea of actually providing affordable housing seems to be not as prominent to me in this whole document. Actually building. So relative to the element that was about the impacts, and I'm curious if you can say a little bit more about, one area seems to be much more prominent than the actual providing housing. And that's just an impression that I'm getting rather than really digging deep into it.
I can quickly respond to that. I mean, I think that's a great point. I think in some ways we've kind of assumed that that's just something we already do and we're continuing to do. I'm sure there's more we can do. I think, yeah, so I think point taken. It's one of the biggest and most important things you can do is to increase housing and supportive housing. I think we were trying to figure out what else do we not know about that we need to do and try to highlight those. So I don't think we meant to sort of say we're not doing that anymore, but I hear what you're saying, that it feels like it's emphasized or de-emphasized, but still very much part of our housing element, our RENA goals. So we can we can message that a little bit more strongly. That's
if that's what you heard. I mean, I guess that's the other piece, is that it sounds like some of the stuff you heard, is was a more prominent, but I don't know if that's the case. And actually, this is maybe a clarifying question, but the conversation about RVs and biohazard and things, and towing RVs, are folks living in those, and what happens to those people? I'm just curious about that actual situation.
I suppose I could answer that without answering it, which is that it would be on a case by case basis. Sometimes we don't know because we're not able to tow anything right now. There's certainly a possibility that some could be inhabited, and that would lead us down one path. And then there's those that are just abandoned, which leads us down another path. So we really don't know until we get to that point. It's kind of a non-answer, but.
Yeah, I think, that's where I think having an outreach team would be really helpful, is aside from just handing out a piece of paper or a pamphlet, like to really have that human connection to Vivian's point, having people go out well ahead of any type of relocation, or if there's an issue there. So I think building that trust and trying to offer the services that are available, and any way to make it easier for people to accept those services, I think would be ideally part of that, is lead with the outreach well before anything else happens.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, that's an important point that I think I've brought up in previous meetings, but I just want to hammer home is, everything we do with the community response team, with the police department, we lead with compassion first. And actually, we just worked with Andrea today with Home First to get somebody housed just this very day. So everything we do is with compassion on the front end. We're not looking to displace people, throw people in jail, things of that sort. We understand that, if services and resources are absolutely refused, or there's criminality going on or whatever, that certainly needs to be addressed. But the goal is not to make people's condition worse. It's always to lift people up.
If I may, too, just to kind of piggyback to Anne's initial question, I think especially for those of us that work at the city, we know firsthand how long it takes to build new facilities. And we're also very aware of the budgetary issues. And so a part of our goal was to figure out, okay, we're doing these things, but they're going, they go slowly and it takes time and investment. So what else can we be doing as the city to help these people with where they're at? And so that might also be another reason why it's not like, because obviously, yeah, more affordable housing that's actually affordable would be fantastic, but it's not going to happen overnight. But we can do things like the Dignity on Wheels and other possible things. And so I just want to assure you that housing is definitely, a very key component. So thank you though for asking.
And I want to thank Pilar for being here with us this evening, representing Bill Wilson Center, and Sparky, who was unable to join us. So thanks, Pilar. Sorry it took us a while to get you as a panelist. Any other general discussion, comments, questions, things you want to raise or dig into before we do a little bit of a round robin and ask each of you for your thoughts as they are now on the draft?
And Eli, I was going to maybe suggest that if folks feel like they can't speak to the plan because they didn't have enough time, it might also be helpful to hear, regardless of what's in the plan, what you think your priorities are, even if you aren't for sure that it's in there or not. I think that would still be a valuable thing for us to hear. as you close out, sort of your last mic drop kind of comment, which is, I really want this to be in the plan. That's helpful.
A really great suggestion, Adam. Yeah, so if we are going to give each of you a block of time and we want to hear whatever you have to say, you don't have to talk for 2 minutes. You can just say your piece and say, I'm done. But yeah, it's a great suggestion, Adam. Like, make this your, based on the 5 meetings we've had and what we've passed on from the community input, you can say, these are my priorities. This is what I really think we need to make sure to do with this plan, with the city's work, or make your case, right? For what you think is most important. Great idea. Okay. Then we're going to pull down the slides, but again, if you want to use some of your time to ask us to pull up a strategy because you want to speak to that strategy and you want to have the words up there, let us know and we can do that. Would anybody like to kick us off? I can't go alphabetically because I don't have an alphabetical list. I can go in order of the list that I have in front of me, or we can take volunteers. We're going to do just up to 2 minutes of your opinions, of your thoughts. Any volunteers to go first? Okay. Oh, thank you, Hillary. I do appreciate it. Let me get my timer up.
Go, Hillary.
My timer.
All right, go for it.
So I want to say that I appreciate that there is an emphasis on homelessness prevention, because the more that we stop people from becoming homeless, the less we have to manage people's basic needs when they are homeless and unhoused. I do agree with Anne that we need to put a bigger emphasis on actual unit production, especially in the ELI range, and with Ray, that I would love to see unit targets. And the reason for that is that I think that it's really easy for electeds like city council to hear from naysayers, because when somebody doesn't like something, they show up. And when people don't have objection, oftentimes they don't show up. So electeds often don't hear from the people who are pro housing, especially affordable housing, especially supportive housing in their neighborhoods. And so the more that we can say building housing is important, because if you really want to end homelessness, you have to house the people, then I think that we should say that. I think that there is a good amount of, I do like that there's a section, I think it's section 5, that deals with land use and ways that the city can make it easier to build. And I think that that's a great role for cities, and we should encourage that. And I would prioritize it higher. And then the final thing that I would say is that I also really like that there's section 3, which is about building broad-based support. And I wonder if we could do more to highlight that.
Thank you, Hillary. So expertly timed to the end of my timer. I want to see if any of our community task force members, our district representatives, want to go next. Anne, Daniel, Catherine, Michelle, anybody want to volunteer?
All right, I'll volunteer. I'll have some words to say. So far, I took a look at the plan draft. It looks good, especially for a draft, pretty detailed for draft. The slides were a nice way to sum things up. I'm especially a big fan of the outreach. I believe that's priority area. I took screenshot, took some photos. Priority area 3. I think it's especially important to build, trust among homeless individuals, so that they can they can be able. They feel comfortable enough to get the help they need. I agree with Hillary that we obviously unit production is important, As for Section 6, obviously, prevention is pretty important. I would like to add for Section 6, increased investment in youth mental health to prevent, because I see for Section 6 right here, mostly it's for to deal with, people losing housing for through evictions. But we also, there are another cause of homelessness, I feel like is, obviously, this mental health. And, that starts when during someone's youth. And also, we also see it being a result of, household / family abuse. So definitely more increased investment in mental health through schools, and also maybe encouraging more people to report, be aware and proactive in spotting this sort of abuse so that so that young people can get mental health they need in order so that it can help heal quicker, and so that they won't become homeless in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. I'm hearing addressing those destabilizing forces when folks are young. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to start calling on folks. So I would love to hear from Vivian, if you're up for it.
Sure. So, not surprisingly, I should ask this for a clarifying question, but are these meant to be in order of priorities? So
no, they are
okay.
not in any specific order of priority. They are in an order of almost relation to each other more than priority.
Got it. Well, so I would always put the end solution as first, right, of what we're always aiming to be. So, I'm always, I think another community member, task force member rather, mentioned this, that I think priority area 5 needs to be higher up, because let's face it, even on a one pager, people read what's first, right? So, and I think that you can lose it even if you think you're doing a great job, and Santa Clara, City of Santa Clara is doing a great job, but still we have to keep focus on the end game. Also, like the comments from Ray of making real targets, real goals. I want to clarify, it's not all through production. There's a lot of other ways to get housing through using sources for subsidies and other resources. Not everyone that's homeless in the City of Santa Clara County needs PSH, permanent supportive housing. There's other sorts of housing that can support folks with lower needs that will become homeless and stay homeless if you don't provide it. So there's real value in rental assistance types of programs, and we see success rates across the board. And then I can provide comments offline on specific areas that I think are redundant, or maybe, I would recommend in one place, not the other place. And I feel very strongly, as Ray pointed out, that we should separate interim from permanent housing, because I think it's confusing if we don't.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And for everyone, task force members, we absolutely welcome your feedback after the meeting in whatever form. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna call on Catherine next.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So of the priorities, the street outreach resonates with me the most. So I'm really glad that it's listed there in the priorities. And I do think that reaching out to people that are unaware of available services is really important. But at the same time, if we were able to find more unhoused folks and bring them in to the current services, is that enough? Meaning, do we have enough resources? I know that funding seems to be a huge area that needs more support. So would we even be able to meet their needs at this point now? And then, so one of the other things that I was going to point out is during our visit to the emergency interim housing location with Andrea, one of the things I took away was that permits or like building the campuses isn't actually the issue. It's the funding, being able to pay for everyone involved to help support these kind of services. So just, I don't know what we would be able to do to maintain that so that we can provide these services. So that's all my comments, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Definitely really appreciating all of the very thoughtful comments that y'all are giving with, again, little time to review. So we really appreciate it. We're going to go to Ray next. If you're ready, Ray. And if you have more to share.
Yeah, just a little bit more around, I guess it was, who was it? Who made the comment? I can't recall who made the comments, but just the prioritization around housing. I mean, I appreciate that the strategy is called out as the primary driver of ending homelessness in the opening comments. It feels a little bit buried and a little bit diffuse in the language. I think there needs to be more of a sense of what creating a broad base of support for these strategies are. I mean, we're talking about community engagement, but I think we also need to be very thoughtful about how the city is partnering to create a reliable channel for housing development, especially at the deepest affordability levels. How the city is signaling that housing is going to be, that they're going to be adopting streamlining standards, because they're going to be adopting new legislation, embracing what's coming through the state, encouraging home key applications. I mean, I think there would be good to see a little bit more about what the city's mechanism is going to be for embracing housing development as the primary driver to end homelessness. So I love the concepts of the strategies overall. I want to take more time to dig in deeply, but I think we know what works already. I think there's some great resources that we could tap into outside of the city to provide additional funding and support to make these things happen. But it's that concept of like readiness and willingness to engage, to continue to engage as we go forward. That's pretty important.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. I definitely hear that. Michelle, would you like to share next? If you'd like to, push your turn off, you can, but we're at you on the list.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Michelle Ortega. Not only am I a community member, but I'm also a volunteer. I've been recently with an organization called Silicon Valley Helping Hands, and we service Sunnyvale homeless population. And we've been having to talk to the mayor because we also deal with homeless and trash. And I think when it comes to homeowners' properties and stuff, we have to hold some of those individuals accountable. But then again, it's like a catch-22, we're dealing with people with mental health illness and drug addiction. And I love what I do. I'm really compassionate, just because I have lived experience myself. And I really appreciate that Santa Clara County hired me, and I've been attending the last 6 meetings now. And I've learned a lot, not only from the providers, but also from other members of the community, or what are the solutions to the homeless crisis. And I think that, if we are consistent and we advocate and don't give up the fight, there will be progress, because I've seen it. I've seen people getting housed. I'm one of them. I wouldn't like to call myself a statistic, but I'm one of the success stories. And I'm just really grateful to be a part of this task force community meeting. It was an honor, and I've learned a lot. I really appreciate you guys, each and every one of you. And I've listened and I've learned, there's people in the community that do care about the homeless. And that's just, that's a beautiful thing. And I hope we continue to fight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Yeah, and we want to just echo that appreciation for everyone here. Just the last the 5 meetings before this meeting, we've grown to really, really appreciate you all and your genuine investment and your commitment to this process. So, and also I just want to call out that, Michelle, one of the big things I heard from what you're saying was that the importance of lived experience and people who have that experience working with other people who are unhoused. So thank you for that. Next, we have Pilar.
Great, thanks, Eli, and thank you everybody for letting me join. Sparky she was double booked this evening, so she had asked me to sit in. This is also something I've been following. I am a resident of Santa Clara, a 50-some year resident of Santa Clara, and I've been attending all of the community meetings, and it's really nice, I have to tell you, to see the feedback that was given through the community forums and the surveys show up in this plan. It kind of makes it worthwhile. Like, yeah, the feedback that the residents are giving is being heard. I'm gonna kind of agree with a couple things people have said. Housing production, ELI, so important, and it showed up at every forum that I attended where we were talking about this topic. It showed up a lot stronger than what's showing up here in the plan. So maybe some more proposed strategies could be added to number 5. So I wanted to say that I think I'd like to see in here maybe a call out of some special populations, whether that be young people, right? Bill Wilson Center's emphasis, but also seniors. I didn't see that in here anywhere. And I think that those are 2 groups that have some specialized needs. So that might be nice. And then the other thing around prevention, there's a call out in here somewhere about working with families. And I would take it a step further and maybe even say working with the school districts or families that have their kids enrolled. We see so many families on the brink of becoming homeless or already homeless, and they're still trying to get their kids into school. I just think that might be something that is missing or could be strengthened in the plan.
Yeah.
And again, I got the plan at like 5:30 tonight to read.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
Sorry about that. But I think those are my initial thoughts and comments on it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. And I know you have been following this process closely. So I appreciate you being able to be here and share that. So I am, I think that's everyone. If you're a task force member and you haven't gotten a chance to share your thoughts, let me know. I went through my list. You got to trust the list. All right. I'm going to pass back to my colleague to wrap us up in a minute, but I want to first just from me say, genuinely, task force members, this is not an easy topic to engage with. And for anyone, and particularly those of you who come with personal experience, and it's also just a lot to learn about, a lot to think about, a lot to try to tackle. And I personally want to say thank you so much for showing up every month and going on field trips and doing work outside of these meetings to sort of grapple with these things. And I hope that you do see in the draft plan and the future iterations the amazing impact that you've had in sort of identifying the needs for your community in this area. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for all of your input and feedback today. And I'm going to pass to Joy to wrap us up.
Great. Thanks, Eli. So just to go over some next steps in the city plan approval process, this timeline is to just give folks a rough idea of how things will look over the next several months. So For the rest of this fall, Homebase and the city will refine strategies and the draft plan based on the feedback that we've gained today and feedback from city staff, as well as we will be sharing the draft plan publicly. And then in the winter of 2022 to early next year, there will be public hearings on the draft city plan, approval of the city plan, and then moving into implementation winter and spring 2023. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Adam for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Joy. Well, we made it 6 months later. You know, as Eli mentioned, and Joy, the draft plan is available. It's online. So for those of you who were not task force members, we really do encourage you to spread the word and let people know that the draft is up. We really do. We have lots to work on based on what we've heard tonight, but we welcome all comments. And so please direct those comments back to the city's Housing and Community Services Division. So on this slide here, we have our email and our phone number. We will be promoting this in the next few weeks so people are aware that it's there and that they can comment. And so it's helpful for you to sort of spread the word as well. And before we go, I would like to say a few thank yous, and not to repeat, but I want to sort of say your names just out of appreciation on behalf of the city for the time that you've dedicated to this. So I want to thank Lori. Even if people aren't here tonight, we're being recorded. So so thank you, Lori, Vinay, Dante, Daniel, Anne, Catherine, Michelle, Santiago, Sparky, Hillary, Ray, Andrea, Vivian, Pilar, for your time serving on this task force over the last 6 months. While the task force is ending, I do hope that you can remain engaged as a community member and as nonprofit partners. I'd also like to thank the home-based crew, so Jesse, Eli, Joy, Carla, and Jillian, for your hard work facilitating this outreach in a clear and transparent way, and for your technical expertise along the way. Thank you to Jennifer Carvalho, Sergeant Greg Deeger, Andrew Crabtree, and Rena Brio here at the city for your input and support throughout this 6-month process. And we know there is much work to be done, and we appreciate how this group and this process has brought homelessness more sharply into focus, how it has educated staff and the larger community, and how it is helping us to focus our actions moving forward. So with that, thank you all, and have a wonderful night, and we look forward to seeing you in the next few months.
Thank you.
Night all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.